Are you called to ministry? In 1 Timothy chapter 3, verse 1, the Apostle Paul says, if a man desires the office of bishop or a pastor, elder, he desires a good work. Welcome back, and I hope that you've watched the previous two videos as I have laid out my call to ministry. Again, I just want to remind you that I am not trying to discern your call to ministry, but I think you'll figure out in this video that God used other people to help me discern my call, and perhaps this might be a part in discerning your call to ministry. Okay, so we talked about in parts 1 and 2. Part 1, how God had kind of set the foundation, how it all started, how I even got really involved in ministry. Part 2, we kind of talked about where I sensed this call to ministry, but I rebelled against it. And now we come to part 3. As we come to part 3, I have told my father-in-law, I have told my wife, and I have told my pastor that I feel this call to ministry. Now, this whole thing from the time I began to sense this call and when I answered this call is probably about 18 months. It's about 18 miserable months. So I finally shared with my father-in-law, my wife, and my pastor this call that I felt I had to ministry, because I'd gotten to where I couldn't even rest at night. I couldn't sleep. My mind was just always turning, and I was thinking about that. And so here's what happened. After I shared with them, there was a sense of relief. There was a sense of, whew, I'm glad I got that off of my shoulders. I'm glad I got that off of my heart, off of my mind, right? You probably had situations where something like that happened in life. You had something bottled up and you didn't tell anybody. Then after you told people, you felt a whole lot better. And so that's what I did. I told my father-in-law, who was a pastor, I told my wife, and I told my pastor, and all of a sudden there was this sigh of relief. So what did I do? I was immediately obedient and said, God, you want me to do this? This is what I'm going to do. No. After telling them, I probably went another 6 or 8 months. So, okay, I told everybody, Lord, I'm done now. And I was still pushing back against it. Because remember, there was a part of me that just didn't want to be a pastor, right? I just didn't want to be treated like, and look, overall, the church has always been a blessing to me. I have loved serving the church as much as I've ever loved anything else I've done in life. But when I was on the outside looking in, what I seen was all the bad. I seen the hardships, the difficulties, the frustrations, the backstabbing, backbiting, gossip, right? I saw all that stuff and I was like, man, you know. So I just kind of eased along. I was serving as a deacon, serving as a Sunday school teacher, serving as a youth pastor. And there was kind of a part of me that thought, you know what, Lord, I think I'm giving you enough. You know, I'm just being honest. That's how I felt. That I'm doing all this other stuff. Why do I have to do that? Right? And over time, though, I went through 3 stages. I'm not going to do it. Lord, do you really want me to do it? Lord, you better tell me if you don't want me to do it. I don't know why somebody's calling me on Messenger. I'm not going to answer it while I'm doing this video. So I said that to say this. God slowly warmed my heart up. And by that I mean brought me to obedience to the ministry. So I gradually began to go from, I'm not going to do this, to, Lord, I'll do it if you really want me to do it. And I kind of liken where I was at to where Moses was. You remember when Moses has an encounter with God at the burning bush. Moses knows that the people need to be delivered, right? You know, because he's already took vengeance for them 40 years earlier for one of them killing an Egyptian. He knows that people need to be delivered. He's in complete agreement with that. But Lord, I'm not the guy. Yes, they need deliverance, but I'm not your guy. I'm not a great speaker. You know, who am I that I go before Pharaoh? Well, that's kind of where I was at. You know, even though people had confirmed they believed I was called to ministry, I just didn't think I could do it. And I just thought, you know, I've been the kind of guy that didn't want to speak in front of groups, you know. And teaching that adult Sunday school class, the men's class helped me with that. I got to where I would do a little bit more like on Sunday night or Wednesday night Bible study with the church at large. So God just began to work in those little areas of my life. And so it got me to the point to say, well, I don't think I'm the guy. And again, all of this is it's a lack of understanding because I'm not the guy. Moses wasn't the guy. Jeremiah wasn't the guy, right? Apart from God. So God was working in and through them to bring about his will and purpose. And so, you know, I figure out, well, yeah, I'm not the guy, but this is what God wants to do, right? And so I spent a couple of months in that I don't want to do it, but Lord, I want to be obedient. And then I began to transition to, I want to do it. Isn't that weird? Delight yourself in the Lord and he'll give you the desires of your heart. I think I lived that. I think I experienced that. Because then I got this. So what happens, I'm thinking God's going to call me into ministry. And so I start listening to a lot of preachers. I just start listening, you know, just to, how do you even preach, man? I haven't been to any college, you know, no seminary. All I've been to is church, right? I've been to church and I got a Bible. And so I'm listening to these guys. And the more I listened to preaching, the more my heart warmed up to the idea of doing it. And listen, pastoring is a lot more than preaching, but preaching was something I was a little bit afraid of. I was, you know, A, getting in front of a bunch of people. B, is you're dealing with eternal truth. We have to give an account for the words we speak. James says, let not many of you become teachers. I mean, so I'm battling with this stuff, man. It's real, you know. And speaking of listening to preachers, and speaking, I said earlier, sometimes God used people to help us discern our call. Adrian Rogers, who I love still to listen to this day, I had some CDs of his. Man, I'd order, because back then you couldn't just get on the internet and download sermons. This is in the mid 2000s. I mean, you could buy them. A lot of people were selling them, but they weren't available like they are today. There were some free ones, but so I bought a 12-disc series from, actually my father-in-law had bought it from the Southern Baptist Convention when he was there. And then I said, hey, can I listen to them? So he gave them to me. So I'd be riding down the road. I can remember we going on family trips to Mississippi, and when everybody fell asleep, I put sermon CDs in because nobody wanted to listen to preaching except for me, right? And Adrian Rogers began to tell about his call to ministry. And he called it, I think he said he got the preaching bug. He said the preaching bug latched onto him or something to that effect. And I don't remember his exact words, but this is basically what he said in his sermon. He went from, I'm not going to do it, to I'll do it if you want me to do it, to Lord, I'm fixing to do it. If you don't want me to, you better tell me. And when I heard those words, I looked back and I said, that's me. That's my pattern. I'm not going to do it. Lord, I'll do it if you want me to, but I'm not your guy. And by then I had transitioned to, my heart had warmed up to this idea. I had delighted myself in the Lord, and he had changed my desires. So all of a sudden now I'm thinking, Lord, I'm fixing to do it. You better stop it. Lord, if you don't want me to do it, you better stop it. So what do? I go to my pastor. I said, hey, I'm going to answer the call to ministry. He said, okay, great. He said, a couple of Sundays out, he said, I want you to preach that Sunday morning for me. And I had preached for him a couple of times at that point. So I want you to preach this coming Sunday morning, next Sunday morning, whatever it was. And when you get done preaching, tell the church that God's called you into ministry. I said, okay. So I did that. That was in February of, I believe it was January, February of 2008. And God just opened the door, the church. So the church affirmed my call. So I preached, I announced it to them. The church affirmed my call to ministry. And in February of 2008, the church licensed me to ministry. Basically, a license to ministry in a Southern Baptist church is we as a congregation feel that we see God working in this young man's life, old man, whatever, working in this gentleman's life with the call and calling him to be a pastor. And so now I go from 3 people that have confirmed my ministry to a congregation that says, man, we believe God has called you, and we're going to put our stamp of approval up on it. And so it was just awesome, you know. In fact, if I remember to do it, well, I'll do a little separate part of the video, so I'll make sure I do that. That way I can get both parts in. So there we go. What I'm going to do is take the picture from where I was licensed to preach, and I'm going to stick that picture in here. So, hey, appreciate you taking the time to watch the video. I hope it's helped somebody. If not, hopefully you've just enjoyed my story. I've certainly enjoyed it. And be looking for the next video that comes out. I'm going to tell you how I ended up the pastor of my first church. So stay tuned for that. Be looking for it. My prayer for you is always the same, that the Lord might richly bless you and that you might see all of your blessings as from him.